So you want me to start it, right, Linz?
Yes, please.
Okay. I hope this works. I have my analytics on this and therefore, so see, yeah, okay, you're still moving. Okay. All right. Good. Hi, guys. So this is Mr. Nerenberg and Miss Dwyer from Miami Palmetto Senior High, and we're being joined with Daniel Fein and Lindsey Yang, who are heading, well, we've got a little change of mind. We're heading to Stanford and Columbia, and they decided they wanted to share some information with you. Normally, at the end of a normal school year, they would have been visiting English, AP English or AP US History, and speaking to juniors about the experience on the Common App, how to get ready for summer, Common App situations are going to occur. And now today we're taping this on July 30th. I guess that's a date. And we're going to know the Common App opens on the 1st. And by the time you guys watch this, Common App will have been open for about 3 or 4 weeks, and the colleges slowly are opening up their applications. And then at that time, you'll be able to look at what their application looks like, any supplemental essays and everything else. And anything we talk about that you don't understand the vocabulary, it's okay. You'll just have to figure out a way that you're going to learn how to do this. You know, you're going to learn this vocabulary. I think these guys are going to teach you. And give me one more second. Okay. All right. Linz, do you want to start off and just talk about your experience, what some of the things you've got going, and we'll go from there?
Yeah, of course. So the first thing that is in a college application process is you picking the college picking the colleges that you want to apply to. So for most people, this will consist of a mixture of safety, match, and reach schools. In my case, my list was a lot more reach schools than safety or match, but this is not the case for everybody. So I didn't really know how to start my application process when like August rolled around. I knew I had to write essays, I knew I had to pick colleges, but I didn't know how. So I used a bunch of different sites. The one that I found the most useful was CAPPEX, CAPPEX. It's pretty useful it was useful for me for just getting a list of a bunch of colleges, and then I started weeding them out from there based on whether or not after I researched each college a little bit, then I started like taking them off the list, and eventually I had a list of 11 schools. So Daniel probably has like a different process, but there are also a lot of different sites that you can use. I think College Board has one. Niche provides like a bunch of reviews of different schools if that's what you're looking for. There are a lot of sites out there that you can use, and that's how I originally started it out. Daniel, how'd you start out?
So I started out just thinking of, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So I made a list of every school that I wanted to go to very badly, and then every school that I thought I could realistically go to, and then some safety schools also. And then throughout the process, I looked at their essays and their requirements, and I talked to people who went to those schools and figured out their culture. And eventually I did some calculation based on how much like extra work it would be to apply to schools versus how badly I wanted to go there, and how realistically I could get in. And ultimately, after I got in early action, I decided to not apply to a lot of the schools that I was going to apply to.
So one thing about early action, early decision is if you, I applied early action, but I did not get in.
Can you remind everyone what early action, early decision are? Maybe they don't know.
So early action is when you submit your application, usually by November 1st, sometimes it's earlier. I think one of the deadlines is October 15th. But basically you can get an earlier decision on your application if the school really likes you, usually by December or January. So I applied to Princeton restrictive early action. So most of the Ivy Leagues or top colleges are restricted with early action if they're not early decision, which means that you can only apply to one private school early action. This doesn't apply to public schools. So like I could have applied to Georgia Tech or University of Michigan, as well as Princeton early action, but you can only apply to one private school early. However, if you're early decision, that just means that you apply by usually the same date, the same early date. But if you get in early decision, your decision is binding unless for financial reasons you can't go. So I didn't get in early action, which meant I expanded my college application list by about 6 or 7 more schools after that. So one thing I want to tell everyone who's planning to apply early action or early decision, if you have a list of schools, be ready for that to change if you don't get in. Like, I'm not trying to say this as discouragement, but especially for early actions, your chances aren't going to be significantly higher than in the regular decision process. This is only if you have a dream school, you know you want to go in, get in. You know that if you get in, you want to go. But if you can't, then you need to expand your college list after that and hopefully make all of them by the January deadline. So
Sorry. At the same time, if you aren't that decided about a school, and you want to go to a top college, I wouldn't waste the early action restrictive option, because it does show colleges that you actually want to go to those schools very badly, and they are more likely to accept you, at least by a little.
one other thing I want to add to that is a lot of people told me, if you know you really want to go to this school, do it early action or early decision, whichever one, just because you really want to go there. After going through the process, I'm a little less enthusiastic about it, mostly because most of the time it's your first application that you're submitting. And if it's your first application, it means you're less experienced when you submit that application than when you submit your January deadlines. So in my case, I kind of regretted a little submitting early action, but what's done is done. And it's really a toss-up. If you know you want to go to this school and you think you can get in, go for it. But at the same time, just know that it's the first application you're submitting. And if you haven't done anything like this before, you'll be less experienced than when you come out of January.
I have to add one quick thing. If I'm correct, neither of you used professional counselors to help you, correct?
No.
So
No.
you guys did this all by yourself. Daniel, you had a brother to ask questions to. And Lindsay, did you have anybody support you? I know I supported you a little bit, but I think that was more emotional.
Yes, it was emotional. And also when I started freaking out about if my essays were good or not, and I sent you like 5 of the same essay. But my parents read all of my applications. We went through all of them right before, like through the entire Common App, through all of my essays right before we submitted. So and I read a lot online because I didn't have anyone going to college before me in the US. So I think College Vine has a list, like every year they publish like
Say that again in case people didn't hear that.
College Vine. It's just college and then Vine. They have an essay proofreading service, but I didn't use that. Mostly what I did was they have a lot of articles about different top colleges, like Yale, all the Ivies, and then some liberal arts colleges as well, where they give you like tips on how to write the supplemental essays, which I found pretty helpful.
Yeah, those are really good.
Do you have any advice for kids that definitely know they want to go to college and they want to go out of state, but they really don't know where to go? And I've heard a lot of kids say, I know that I would like to go this place, but I don't know if I would even get in. It's hard to have a dream when they're not sure if they even have a shot. But what would you say to that student?
I think you don't have a lot to lose except the application fee. If you just want to try. I applied to 17 schools. I was accepted to 7 of them. And on the day that Ivy decision came out, I had a lot more rejections and wait lists than acceptances. But I don't really regret having done all of that, because in the end, I still had a chance. And as long as that chance is there, I don't think you'll regret anything by at least trying to take it.
I think especially now, colleges are becoming more like less exclusive with maybe like GPA and SAT score, and more just like they call it like the holistic review. But I think anyone who really is passionate about something and wants to go to a good school has a chance.
Exactly. I think they're looking less at your grades and your numbers and looking more at your essays and trying to get a gauge of your character instead of how good at a test you are.
Should we jump right into essays then? I mean, how do you write the perfect essay?
Well, I want to make sure before we jump in, is there anything else you want to talk about selection of choice of schools? Because you guys had two up until decisions in December, you guys were pretty much on the same path, right? Until you got your decision on early actions. You both went early action, non-restrictive. So December came, Daniel was celebrating, December came, and you went into a deep, dark space for about 3 days and came out. But I'm saying in general, it's like, but you took the same strategies. So is there anything about the college search that you want to give hints to the kids? If I was sitting in an 11th grade class now, I'd be saying to you, how did you make the choice of your schools?
So how I picked my early action school was the year before I'd gone up and like visited a bunch of top colleges, MIT, some of the IVs and all that. And that's how
These kids can't do that.
Yeah, they have, from what I've heard, they have a lot of like online tours that are pretty good. I actually tried one of them out. They didn't seem that bad, even though it can't really replicate the same experience. But at the same time, there were a lot of colleges on my list that I'd only really heard of and didn't get to see in person. So though I made my early action decision from the colleges that I visited, you can still find out a lot just by reading and listening to people who've gone there, listening to alumni, listening to people who applied. And then of course, there's always that thing that's like, oh, this college only has one essay. Maybe I should apply there because it'll be a little easier. So there's that.
And another thing that I did to kind of decide where I wanted to go is I looked at on YouTube a lot of like day in the life videos of people at Stanford and Harvard and Princeton just to see like where I thought I fit the best. This is more actually choosing where I wanted to go than choosing where I wanted to apply. But
you should have had that when you were applying. That may have been a nice little thing to look at in back last August.
Yeah.
A day in the life of.
Yeah. Also, this probably doesn't apply to everyone, but if there's a certain career you're interested in or like a certain company you want to work for, you can go on LinkedIn and filter for different schools and different careers and see which schools have more people at different places.
Okay.
One more thing I want to plug is raise.me. I think Mr. Nerenberg has definitely talked about this a lot. If you're worried about financial aid, there are a lot of really good colleges on that site. And basically you enter what your grades, your test scores, and a bunch of other things. And you can get a lot of micro scholarships that really build up. Like when I first looked at the site, Tulane and Northeastern are on there, I think. I think I ended up with like $20,000 from each school, even though I didn't ultimately apply. But if you're worried about financial aid and some of your choices are on there, you should definitely try that site.
Thank you. Okay, now Ms. Dwyer. Okay, so Daniel, you made your list simply just by researching schools, and Lindsay, you really just were like a potpourri. Did you guys go, last question, did you guys go out the Southeast Florida favorite? Was there any school that was different than the rest, or did you stay to the standard schools? Do you have any unique schools on your application list?
I think Williams isn't a college that a lot of people apply here, but Mr. Nerenberg just told me one time, maybe I want to see you apply to like a liberal arts college that's kind of out of there. So I kind of looked at the top 10 liberal arts colleges in the US and I looked at how many essays there were for each school. And I eventually settled on Williams because it was only one essay. And the essay itself was something that I thought I could write pretty well. I didn't ultimately get in, but that's one of the weirder schools, I guess.
Very, very competitive. It's very super competitive school.
I have two schools that I didn't apply to, but I would if I had to do it again. So the first one is Carnegie Mellon is actually very good for engineering and computer science. And even if you're considering going to an IB or something, it's comparable if you're doing those subjects. And also Rose-Hulman is a very good STEM school as well.
Oh, there's one more. I got a fee waiver from Rochester Institute of Technology. I was pretty sure I wasn't going to go anyway, but there was no essay and it was just the application. So I applied anyway and got in, and I actually got a pretty big scholarship from it. So if you get those kind of fee waivers for schools that you don't really think you're going to go, but just do it anyway. It could have been, if you end up not having another choice, it could be a very good choice for you.
Okay. Next topic. Okay, I think we got that one good. Now if they're sitting in 11th grade, 12th grade classes right now, they're scared. Okay.
They're about to get more scared.
Yes, we're going to stress them out. Mr. Dwyer, what was your question again? I'm sorry.
How do you write the perfect essay?
You want me to start?
Yes.
Okay, so the best advice I heard when actually thinking about how to do the essay is to imagine a Venn diagram where one circle is college relevant experience, like leadership or creativity, things like that, and or characteristics. And the other circle is your life and like the events that have happened to you and the things that you feel like you embody. And then your essay has to be the intersection of those circles. So for example, like if you've been through like a divorce or something, some dramatic event, you shouldn't write about it unless it also communicates some characteristic about yourself that colleges would like. And by the same token, like you should write about things that aren't as dramatic if they do like convey things that are positive about you. And then in terms of deciding how to actually structure your essay, there are two like main approaches that I've seen. And so there's like the narrow approach and the broad approach. The narrow approach consists of you talk about one event or one story that ties together a lot of like themes about who you are. And I tried to do this for a while, but I felt like I didn't have one thing that kind of like described like everything about me well enough. And then so then the other approach is the broad approach, where you maybe talk about like three different things, but you discuss them through a common lens, and you talk about how they all contribute different things to who you are, but in the end you're one main component, and that's kind of that ties it all together and makes it one nice essay. And then my last thing is in terms of deciding actually what who you are or what you're going to do at all, there are many things that I've heard. One of them is to write a journal, like keep a journal for a few weeks and just see like what makes you the happy, like look back on it and see like what made you the happiest, what motivates you, that kind of thing. And then I've also heard of writing like 30 to 40 events throughout your life that you remember, like just from when you're a kid to when you're adult, and seeing what you think, reflecting on what was the most formative for you and what actually changed your life the most and made you who you are. And then the last thing I've heard is to make kind of a web of your interests and motivations. And then the good thing about that is that at the end, when you decide what you want to actually communicate to the colleges, you can kind of ration out parts of yourself that you want to discuss throughout your main essay and your supplemental essays, and you can kind of check them off as you go. So you make sure that every application you send, regardless of which supplemental essays they have, communicates your entire application and story.
Yeah, that's something I want to touch on as well. One thing you want to do throughout your entire application is create a narrative for yourself. You need to pick the person that you're going to show to these colleges, and you can't deviate too far from that, or else it's going to look stilted, awkward, or just not very real. So figure out who you want to show to the colleges. Are you hardworking? Are you creative? Are you someone who thinks out of the box all the time? Just something, all of your essays need to tie into this in some form or the other. And another thing that I like, the web analogy that Daniel used, your application is not just one part, is not just the one thing that you think is the most important thing in your entire life. So everything needs to tie together and show the entire person. So let's say you play an instrument, and you think that's like the main crux of what you've been doing so far. You can't just talk about that instrument unless you want to just look like one-sided. So talk about the instrument, maybe talk about some other community service thing that you also did in a supplemental essay. Like my main Common App essay was about the piano, but there was a lot of other things that I did besides playing the piano. And that's what I elaborated in my supplemental essays, in the activities and the honors. You can't just be one thing. You have to be a lot of things all at once. Then one other thing I want to say is if you have choices in your essays, like not all colleges will want you to just, hey, this is the prompt, you write about this. Some of them will give you like 3 or 5, even 5 or 10 choices of essays that you want to write. So I say just mess around with it for a little bit. There were a lot of essays that I thought I was going to do the X prompt, but I ended up going with Y prompt. So
Why? What happened?
Sometimes I thought I had a really great experience to write about, but then when I started writing about it, it didn't come out correctly. What I think is the most important thing in an essay is that it flows. So if you start feeling like you're hitting a rock and this is not what you want to write about, don't try to write about it. Move on to something else.
That's good.
I should mention that I actually used, it's called Narrative Applications. It's an essay review service, and I found it like extremely helpful. It's kind of expensive, but compared to actual college advisors, it's much cheaper. And they give you your edited essay, and then they write like paragraphs about what you should change and very specific action.
One other thing I want to suggest is if you're open to your essays being read by other people, don't just like I had my parents read every single one of my essays, and Mr. Nerenberg definitely read a lot of them. But go up to someone who you talk to, who's your friend, but maybe you don't have they haven't read your essays yet, and just hand them an essay that maybe you're unsure about and say, can you read this? Does this sound like me? I did this once for one of my Princeton essays, and it was pretty helpful. So
I would only add a suggestion to that is to only do that with a select 1 or 2 people.
yeah.
Don't put your essays out to jury, like where everybody's going to give their opinion.
Right.
And don't read too many other people's essays, because you get contaminated.
Mm-hmm.
Start reading everybody else's essays. You start comparing your own to them, and then, or maybe, you think yours isn't good enough. But I mean, I don't know. That's just things that I've heard. I've watched a lot of kids get burned out by correcting other people's essays.
Hey, one more thing. Mr. Nerenberg mentioned it once when my dad actually made me do it. You could read your essays out loud. I know it's very uncomfortable, and you don't have to do it in front of other people. Like my dad had me read it in front of my entire family, which is very, haha. But if you want to just read it in your room out loud, and besides helping you figure out if it sounds like you, if it doesn't sound too stilted or awkward, you also find grammar mistakes and things like that. So if you're comfortable enough to do that, it's a win.
As a parent, I was just gonna say, as a parent, it's really hard not to rewrite it, because I read my daughter's essays and I really wanted to fix them and make them perfect. And my husband, who's an attorney, wanted to fix them and make them perfect. And we really had to stop ourselves, because it's not our application. It didn't sound like I fixed one and it sounded great for me. It sounded just like me, but I wasn't going to school. It was my daughter. So we scrapped that one and she went with one that really was her. So it's really hard not to edit the heck out of them and make them perfect. But I know what is perfect. But yeah, that's just, as a parent, really try to stop yourself from doing that.
Right. So by that same token, if you give your essay to someone else to read and they correct it and they hand it back to you and you don't like it, you don't have to take the edits. Like I had several people read a lot of my essays, and some of them just when they came back to me, they just didn't sound correct and I didn't like it, including some of my parents' corrections. So no one's going to be offended that you didn't take their corrections. So don't feel bad about it.
They're not going to know.
Exactly. It's your essay. You're the one that ends up submitting your application, not them. They're not going to see it. So you don't even need to tell them if you don't want to.
Who read yours, Daniel?
It's like a few of my friends read them, and also my mom read all of them.
Okay, and for the people who are watching this, and I'll say this to you later on, if you don't want your parents to read your essay and you want to go to somebody else, it's fine, but someone should look at your essay. That's the only thing. Someone should not correct it. Someone should read your essay to make sure there's no flaws in the whole thing. Sometimes you can make a mistake and not see it, because how many times did you read your piano essay to yourself? I mean, it's like you don't even hear the essay anymore.
Yeah,
so you definitely want somebody else to read it and look for the glaring mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, this is like I would normally say if we were sitting in the classroom talking.
Oh, and then for most of the seniors watching this, you'll probably have Miss Spivak or Miss Supersad for AP Lit next year. So they'll actually read one of your essays at the beginning of the year. Depends on which one you choose. I chose my Common App. A lot of other people did. But they'll read over your essays and kind of be one of the people who just edits it, I guess.
Okay, and for people anybody from the public watches this, that's our AP Lit teachers. Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, what else? You want to talk about supplemental essays for a few minutes?
Terrifying. Um,
Oh, no.
so many. Okay, one thing I want to tell everyone is that even if it's a different prompt, you can use the same essay several times as long as it fits. Mr. Nerenberg called me the recycler because I kept reusing old essays and being like, I think this one fits if I change a few words here and there. It works.
You have to be organized.
You have to be organized. Like I had a spreadsheet with all of the colleges I was applying to plus all of the essays, and I would like check off the states of progress they were in. Like, were they completely finished? Did I submit them? Are they still in editing? Have I even started them? And that's how I got myself through because I like checking things off. But if that's not the same way for you, just make sure you know your essays. Make sure you know which ones you haven't started, which ones you're editing, which ones that are still in draft status, everything. You need to keep track of all of that, or so you're probably going to miss deadlines.
And what school they're going to.
Yes, that too.
That's important.
Oh yeah, because you don't want to be writing your why Duke essay and then submit it for your why Yale essay instead.
It's happened. So go ahead. So how did you attack, either one of you, how did you attack your supplemental essays?
So I copy and pasted all the prompts and put them in a Word document, and then it was like 30 pages long, and it was like terrifying to look at. But I think that was important because there's a lot of little short supplements especially for Stanford and Yale that are kind of like fun to like just like think about when you're like not doing something. So I ended up having, by the time I actually got to those applications, I had a lot of the answers for those little ones already kind of like figured out from just thinking about them.
Yeah, so everyone has phones. Well, almost everyone has phones, and if you don't, you have a piece of paper and a pen. So if sometimes an idea will come to you and you'll think, oh, I'll remember it later, and then when you get back to your laptop, it's gone from your mind. So write it down, just stick it somewhere, write it down, and then when you come back, it's still there for you to flesh it out.
Sometimes stickies just work the best, Post-its.
Exactly, yeah.
You know,
I probably had like 10 different notes on my phone with different things that I thought up for different essays.
your favorite supplement, both of you, give me your favorite supplemental essay you wrote.
Okay, there was one for Dartmouth that I wrote. It was they gave a quote and it was something like, what is something beautiful that you've created? And I didn't get into Dartmouth, so take this with a grain of salt, but I liked my essay ended up being about the friendships that I made while I was at camp over the summer prior. And I thought I liked the essay a lot. So that was my favorite.
Stanford had a prompt that was what is the most meaningful thing to you, or what's meaningful to you or something. And my entire application, I was kind of trying to maximize like how creative I was being with everything. But then for that one, I decided I just need to put like family, even though it was not that creative probably. But I ended up writing it and really liking it.
Okay, and your least favorite supplement? Hardest one?
Every single YX school essay that I had to write.
Yeah, it's hard to make the Y schools essays sound like genuine while you're still kind of like playing to the school and seeming as interested as you need to be. For those, it's important to make sure that you can't change the name of the school and still have the essay make sense, because the schools know that people like to do that and stuff. And also, I would say with those to focus on, you might like throw in a class or two that is taught at the school or like a course or something, but I think that doesn't come off as good to the school as playing to like their mission statement and the culture at the school. If you can explain why you as a person belong in the school's community in terms of what the mission of the school is, I think that's better than just saying that you want to go there because they have a good engineering program or whatever.
One thing I didn't obviously swap out school names, but I kind of used a sort of template once I sort of figured it out. So I would start off with like a small introduction and basically introduce a couple of things that I really liked about the school, depending on how long the essay was supposed to be. And then I would elaborate on those things and tie it into a couple of my interests in like the body part. Then I would tie it all back together in the conclusion. So that process kind of worked for me as I worked through all the Y College essays, and you are welcome to try it out if you think it'll work for you.
Okay. You want me to keep asking questions? You have anything written down you want to talk about? By the way, for those who are watching this is not pre-planned or organized.
Not at all, which is why I'm stuttering all the time. One more tip I want to give about the essay is don't worry about the word count at first. As long as your idea is solid and the essay is good, then you can start cutting it down, but only then. Because if you're writing your essay and thinking, oh my God, this essay can only be 50 or 150 words, it's not going, you're probably going to be too busy worrying about the word count to actually write a good essay, and it can come off as very awkward.
Right. Expect to go way over and then just get rid of everything that's not like really, if there's like a sentence in there that you don't think communicates as much as it should or is significant to the actual essay, then you can get rid of it.
And by the same token, your essay doesn't have to be as long as the word count allows you to go. Like I read for one of the Columbia essays, I read someone's and the word limit was like 250 words or 300. Their essay was only like 220, 230, but it was a really good one. So if you think it's good, you don't need to add more.
Good. What else? Do you have anything there on your list before we go on about essays?
I mean, like we're telling you to panic, but don't panic. Seriously. There's a whole month between November and December, the whole month of November that I didn't utilize as much as I should have, because after the November 1st deadline, I kind of got complacent and I was like, okay, I'll just wait. I have time. And then I didn't have time and I spent my entire winter break writing essays. So probably not a lot of you are going to listen to this because I had the same advice and I did not listen to it. But there's a whole month there. You can do something with that.
So you are suggesting that
You muted yourself.
Yeah, I think you're muted.
there we go. You are suggesting that kids do EA or ED if they're looking to go to one of the most prestigious schools in the country. If they can afford ED, if they can afford ED and know where they want to go, or they are low income and the school meets 100% financial need, and you love a school, are you telling them to go ED?
I am not. Okay, I will tell you to ED if you're absolutely sure that you will be happy at the school that you are going to. I didn't ED anywhere, even though I probably could have, just because I didn't want to tie myself down early. But I'm not going to say the same for EA, even if you super love the school, just because your chance, if you ED, your chances are actually a little bit higher than if you go regular. But EA, because you're not binding your decision to the school, the actual acceptance rate may seem higher, but this is mostly for athletes, for people who are basically guaranteed a spot early. And if you're not one of those people, you're not like fantastic or like brilliant or anything, then you might want to think twice, in my opinion.
Any idea, any thoughts on that? If you could have ED to Harvard, would you have? At that time?
I would have thought about that a lot. I think ED is scary just because it's like a big commitment, but I would recommend doing EA over doing nothing. If you don't want to ED anywhere, I completely understand that, but I think that EA is just a chance to get the process over with faster, and it actually gets you moving along on finalizing your Common App earlier and everything. So I think EA, especially restrictive EA, is actually a good thing to do.
Okay.
I think EA-ing public universities or your safety schools or match schools is a good decision as well, because you're getting the reassurance early that you will be able to go somewhere. It's
Okay,
just
so
I'm a little more hesitant about the top universities.
So let's say, so student doesn't have a passion, they're not going to do ED, they want to go to a top tier school, they're not sure they can afford it, but they want to do it anyway. You're suggesting they do EA at any of the state schools that have no restrictions you're all saying November 1, but I think it's going to be December 1 for this year. So you're suggesting they get those done and then
Yeah.
take the month of December and work on the other schools. I don't know if the January 1 I'm hearing is going to January 15. Every school's going to be different, obviously, but they're all going to be delayed a little bit. So, but that's what you're suggesting, and then wait and see. Is that what you're saying? And then submit by the January 1 deadline, all the other schools. Because there are kids who want to get everything done by the first deadline. You have
Yeah.
friends that had everything. I mean, they were done. I mean, those are the kids I tried to slow them down, but I can't slow them down, you know, so.
I don't think it's a great idea to go all in with like 10 schools at once, like apply to 10 public universities just because you can. But if you have a few, then 3 or 4 applications is fine to go by the early deadline, I think.
Daniel, how many did you have done when you sent in Harvard's?
I had probably like 3 or 4 done.
Okay, Lynn's, same?
Yeah, probably same.
Okay, and that's counting our state schools and
Yeah,
everything else.
that's because you have to pay a lot of attention to, a lot of colleges say a deadline publicly, but then they have other like nuances. Like for
Mhm.
example, Duke,
They had the
I think-
December 20th priority interview deadline.
right, stuff
Yeah.
like that. And also like Vanderbilt has a deadline, and then they have a deadline if you want a scholarship, which is earlier. So
And then they have ED too.
right.
Yeah. Oh God, I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh, Stanford. Okay, Stanford for if you're submitting a music supplement, their deadline is way earlier, which I didn't realize until like 2 weeks before. So I had to finish my application by December, like the first week of December instead of January. So pay attention to that.
Okay, for any of the supplemental stuff. And I
Yeah.
imagine this year is going to be interesting with supplemental with a lot of schools going test optional. That
Mhm.
stuff's going to count a little bit more, imagine. Just guessing. All right, what else is on the list? Ms. Dwyer, what else do we have on the list that we don't really have a list of?
When talking about the Common App, how do you choose which activities will reflect best on you?
So like I said before, it's a narrative about yourself. So you want all of your activities to reflect those qualities that you're trying to show to the colleges. So if you wrote your essay about, like, going back to the early example, your instrument, and put that as like number 10 on your activities list, that's not going to look natural. Like, why did you write your essay about this super important thing if it's not important according to your list of activities? So in your activities section, you're going to want to list all of them from most important to least important. And these activities, there's a lot of different ones that you could put in. You can put in community service, music, art, drama, STEM camps, and even like if you do housework at home, if you're one of the primary caretakers in your family, or you take care of your grandparents or something like that, you can put that there. Volunteering also works, but everything has to be from most important to least important.
Not time, not chronological.
Not time.
Yeah, importance.
Yeah, that's
And
important.
and for the descriptions, the 2 things I would stress is that they should be dense and they should be quantitative. So like they should have as much information as you could possibly fit in the however many characters it is.
Characters.
How many is it?
125, which is not a lot.
It's not a lot at all. You barely have room to write a sentence. So I wouldn't write any sentences. I would just write like bullets separated by semicolons or something like that.
Exactly. No, don't just cut out all the unnecessary words. As long as you get the point across, that's all you need.
Narrative for the essay, accomplishments and activities in bullet form.
Mm-hmm.
Basically what you're saying. Were you surprised when you got to the Common App and you actually were sitting there looking at the application on how few spaces there were for you to put everything you've done?
Yeah, it was like I had to condense my entire life into 5 sentences max, and that was not how I expected things to go at first. Like 125 characters, including spaces, actually, is terrible.
And how about the limited amount of things you could actually list?
That actually wasn't too bad for me. There, you have room for 10 items, and then I had around like 5 or 6 very important things that I wanted to put in there. But the thing is about that, there were some things that I thought were like of equal importance, but you can't do that. You just have to put them one after the other. So sometimes it seems like, hey, I thought this was of like equal importance to this other thing, but it seems like it's less or more important now.
Also, if you do a lot of like little things that you don't think are significant enough on their own to be on the list, but you can actually like group a few things together. And then, like for example, I did like history bowl and science bowl and school duel, which are all like buzzer competitions. So I had one heading that was just buzzer competitions, and then like I listed all of them in the description and like what achievements and stuff.
Right. Also, if you don't have enough room to list all of your achievements in the very short description section, you can like sort of link them back in your additional info section where you can put basically however much you want. So I had some things that I won for community service. Then I ended up putting like awards and links to articles in the additional info section, which you are able to do.
Great. Good. That's a great suggestion.
Oh, one more thing. If there's something you really, really want them to see, put it multiple times throughout your application. Like, I don't have a lot of top tier national awards. So like the one or two that I actually had, I put it in the activity section. I think I put it in the honor section, and I put it again in the additional info. And in some of the supplemental essays, I mentioned it again, and in my Common App essay.
And you asked me to put it in your letter.
Exactly. So put it everywhere if you really think that you need to do it.
Mr. Nerenberg, here's a question as a parent to you. The kids can't answer this one. What about all the kids that had everything they were going to do this summer get canceled? I know the reps are saying add it in.
Right.
But would that be number 1 or number 5? What if it was amazing? It was going to be the best thing they've ever done, except for they didn't do it. Is that number 1?
You know, we're venturing on new grounds this year, and from different workshops we've heard, they're telling us, say what you were going to do and why you couldn't do it. You know, it's basically, and they know why you couldn't do it. But I mean, they're saying, what was your project? Basically, you're saying, why is your project? What was I remember years ago, we had a kid talk, his whole essay was about the project that failed. You know, this unbelievable dream he had as a freshman and sophomore, and he put it together and did it, and it just didn't fall together. I mean, it just failed. And that was what his essay was about. I thought it was a super unbelievable essay because it showed, you know, how did he handle defeat? Every one of these kids are going to be in that same situation. I think the kids who have a project they've been doing and they're going to, they just didn't finish it, done something to write about. The kid who was procrastinating, thinking I'll do it junior, senior year, it's not much you can say. I dreamed of doing something, but I didn't do it. No, you're going to have to say, you can't talk. I don't believe you can talk about a dream that you never acted on, but you can talk about a dream that you started that didn't get finished.
Or the internship that was going to happen. It just didn't because it didn't.
Right.
So it'll be on a student by student basis. Their lists will be very individual.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think for the things that should have happened, there's probably some buildup towards that internship or towards that program that they could still talk about in an essay. Like if you applied to a STEM camp this summer, you've probably been interested in STEM for some time. So you can talk about that somewhere or put it into your activity section, just label it STEM or science or whatever topic that it is. And maybe in the additional info or even in the description box, if you have room for it, you can say, was going to do this or was going to do X activity.
An analogy I've heard that's, I think, from the Stanford Dean of Admissions is that assembling a class for college is kind of like putting together a symphony with respect to like, you need the best violinist and you need like the best oboe player, like that you're competing with people in your category to get into college, not with just people broadly. So that implies don't worry so much about people at your school and competing with them, and also that you need to put yourself through your narrative into a category that's like less competitive for you. So like if you're say like an Asian male and obviously there's a lot of Asian males that are very good at math, maybe angle your application such that you talk about your experiences with like foreign relations or public policy or something that's slightly different that can distinguish you and put you in a category where you have strategically better chances of getting in.
But one thing I want to caution about that is, again, it has to reflect your narrative. If all of your awards are in math or science, and then you start talking about wanting to become an English major or a foreign policy major, it's not going to work out extremely well. Like, I couldn't have painted myself as a history major, even if I wanted to, just because all of my activities and honors were so geared in the other direction.
Even though you took 6 or 7 history classes, probably.
Yeah, but like, it's your extracurriculars.
I know, I agree. I'm just saying, but in general, because you guys take
Yes.
everything we have.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, so we could talk about anything else about the Common App that you like to talk about. Any suggestions you would give for the kids? They're going to have a COVID question, and it's optional. To, about what they accomplished or what they didn't accomplish, or during the COVID. Any suggestions for them?
All I can say is don't make it sound like you're complaining. That's kind of a turnoff. State the facts, state what you were going to do, what you have done, and how this all tied in. But don't make it sound like you're complaining about the situation and how bad everything was, because colleges are looking for people who can make the best out of bad situations. And if it just seems like you're complaining endlessly about it, that's not what they're looking for.
Yeah, I would actually go completely the opposite direction and talk about how it was an opportunity for you to learn something or be with your family or something like that, and not talk about how it's negative at all.
Yeah, you could turn it into like a sort of mini essay if you wanted to, about something good or something unexpected that happened, besides the fact that we got hit by a pandemic.
Still being hit.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else on your list, Lindsay, that you had that you originally wanted to talk
we
about?
could talk about the honors section, which is kind of similar to the activities section, except instead of 10 things, you can only list 5, and there is no description box for anything. You put down your honors, you put down what level it is, regional, state, or national, or international, I think. And that's it. It's also strictly academic. Don't put community service or music awards in there. It's just stuff you've gotten from school, book awards, things like that, or Olympiad awards, or like competition things, not extracurricular stuff.
That's a new thing that occurred about 4 years ago. It used to be narrative in there, and it was too much to read. So they wanted to sing, because it's all the same throughout the country. Really.
Are there any tips for that? Because what if your best award was your freshman year?
So, I think they have you check off which grade you earned that award, and you can put in multiple grades if you earned the same award multiple times. So if it's your most important, if it's your best award and you're the most proud of it, put that first. Everything is in order of importance on the Common App, except for AP scores, which Nerenberg told me when I was freaking out. But the honors section is something that if you have something really good in there, you want to repeat that multiple times, like I did throughout my application. Like if you have some top tier award that you want to get recognized, put it in the honors section and try to tie it into your activities section as well.
So I have a unique circumstance with my honors section that I did Odyssey of the Mind like for a very long time, but the best I did was in 9th grade, and then the rest and then throughout high school I did like a little bit worse. So what I did was I wrote all the awards in one box. I wrote like one time second place national, and then the other ones, and then I just checked all the years, and they don't really know which year's what, but they know that I did all of them. And then another sort of general tip is if you have an award that is immediately recognizable and prestigious, and you have an award that is meaningful to you but less known or less like universally prestigious, then I would put the one that's lesser known ahead of the one that's more known, because then colleges can see that, oh, this thing that we don't know what it is actually as meaningful as this thing that we know is important. So then it kind of convinces them that both are important.
Is there room to spell it out without saying the acronym? I mean, because I know some things we use an acronym, TFT. I mean, so.
Right.
Yeah, there's more room in like the title the title box for honors, then there actually isn't the description section for activities. So if you can fit as much as you can into there.
Okay, and don't use the acronym.
Yeah, if you can avoid acronyms if possible, unless they're immediately recognizable, like MOF data, you can just say MAU. But if it's something more obscure, then you want to try to spell it out.
Yeah, and try to describe the awards that people wouldn't really know what it is. You have some space, so try to describe them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to another topic. How about letters of rec?
Get your reassurances in within like the first month or two. You don't want to be scrambling for a recommendation a couple of weeks before you actually have to submit it. And make sure your teachers know that they're writing you a rec, even if they've promised it to you like a couple of years ago. Hit them up over summer and be like, hey.
Summer's over. By the time they're watching this, summer's over. So
Okay.
we're now in the first week of school if they're going to watch this.
Well, hit them up in the first week of school. Just you can't visit them.
Can't visit them.
Text them, email them, something, and make sure they know, like, get yourself some reassurance that they're writing it for you.
Correct.
You never know. They might forget.
I'm actually convinced that letters of rec behind essays are about the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would make sure that, I mean, just beyond, you don't want to be scrambling for a rec, obviously, but also the recs that are written for you, you want to make sure that the teachers who write them actually like know you and have stories that they can tell about you. And I would recommend, regardless of what the teachers ask for when they write your rec, I would add some like little anecdotes that you want them to include, like about maybe you'd be like, oh, remember when I was in class and this happened or something that maybe like brings out some of the best parts of your actual application. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I've told you guys this, but I would give a different senior profile to a counselor than I would a teacher. A teacher doesn't need to know an obstacle, but a teacher needs that jog of a memory of a funny situation or a time that you helped or a time that maybe you didn't do well, and a counselor has to know the whole person. So I think it's important that to change your senior profile around and also fix it up from sophomore year.
Mm-hmm.
Don't use the same senior profile that you did in Miss Polito's class sophomore year or Purse's class.
So for kids that have never done this before, I'm watching this, I'm like, oh no, I didn't ask anyone for a recommendation. How do they get recommendation? Do you need it for every school? How does it work? Just because if kids have never done this before.
Right, so public universities, I don't think need letters of recommendation. These are mostly for private universities or maybe the real top tier public universities. So usually they ask for 2 letters of recommendation from teachers and usually academic subjects. I think you can get away with like music or drama, but typically core academic subjects.
Right brain, left brain, as I always say. One from the right, one from your right brain, one from your left brain, and a third optional would be somebody from the music or another field. Or
right. And then there's 1 counselor rec, and then sometimes they'll have room for 1 or 2 supplemental recommendations. So like when I went to camp over summer, they gave us an evaluation that could be used as a supplemental letter of recommendation in our college apps. So that's what I put as one of my supplementals. If you did research for a long time and you had a professor or teacher that you know really well, you can ask them to write a letter of rec for you as well. But just if you're going to go outside of like the school and get other people to write your recommendations, make sure they have time and make sure they've agreed to do it before you send them like the request for the letter of rec.
Always ask before you put their email down.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did either of you utilize the idea that you could use like maybe got 3 teachers' letters and use 2 different ones for different schools?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to explain that? Because that's always a question.
So
I feel like we're playing school duel. Hit the buzzer.
So yeah, I had 3 teachers write me recs, and then I kind of based which ones I chose for which school, because I thought that they were all likely good. I based which ones I chose for which school on which ones I thought would emphasize more of the things that I wrote in my application to that school. Like in the supplementals, if I focused on like my STEM background, then I chose more the STEM teacher and one right brain, one left brain. But for other schools, I chose the other two.
So that's an option as you apply to each school, you can pick which teachers
Yes.
give the recommendation. And do you see the recommendation from the teachers?
You don't see the recommendation. You actually waive your right to see the recommendation before you, I mean, you can opt not to, but that sometimes sounds like a
You
message
can't.
to colleges.
No, you can't.
Oh, you
At
can't
Palmetto-
anymore?
Palmetto, if you don't waive your right, we don't write the letter.
Okay, yeah. So you have to waive your right to see the recommendation when you ask the teacher to write it for you. Going back to what Daniel said, most schools have a required number of letters, and then some of them will say it's optional to send a couple of more. So for all of the schools that allowed me to send three teacher recs, I sent all 3 that I got from Palmetto. But for the ones that only allowed 2 is typically the I guess the usual number. I chose based on like what I thought the teacher, how I guess acted in the classroom of that teacher. Did I express the qualities that I want to express to this school? So then I chose, there was one teacher, Dr. Sharp, who I used her rec for every school, but between the other 2, I had to pick based on the school's, I guess, ambience, sort of.
Makes sense. It makes sense. Okay, anything else you want to talk about before I give my one question I want to ask at the end? Go ahead.
One thing I want to talk about is your supplements. I did both science and music supplements. So
okay, explain what you're talking about, because when you said supplement, I thought supplemental essays.
Okay, so these are supplements that are separate from your actual Common App application. So usually when you fill out the application for each school, they'll say, do you want to send in a music supplement or dance supplement, art supplement, STEM supplement sometimes? And then if you check that box, especially for music supplements, they'll have another thing that will take you to, usually it's called Slide Room. And that's where you upload like videos or PDFs or images of things that you've done. So for me, my art supplement was music. Again, pay attention to your deadlines, because usually they give you like a week or so after the actual application deadline to finish your music supplement and upload everything. But in the case of some schools like Stanford, your deadline is actually earlier, a lot earlier than it would be if you just submitted your common application. Also, you need to pay attention to the requirements, because a lot of them have like time limits or video limits. They almost always have a size limit for files, unless you're uploading a video and you can use YouTube to do that. And if you're doing this, I would recommend you make an art or music or whatever resume, just listing your repertoire, teachers' experience, awards, things like that, because sometimes they'll ask you to upload a PDF of that as well. And it's possible for some schools that if they like your art supplement a lot, they may let you in just because of that art supplement, even though you're not necessarily pledging to be an art student at their school.
Correct. I know a lot of schools will just give that supplement. If you send a musical supplement, even though you're not going to be a musician, you're not going to be a music major, they will send your music to the music department to be evaluated, and then you're almost like an athlete. You'll get recruited. They'll want you to come play as in the orchestra where you're not that's not your major.
Exactly.
Happens in a lot of our top tier schools.
Mm-hmm. And it's usually in these cases, they have a disclaimer or something saying that the AOs, the admission officers, are not going to see your music supplement. It's just going straight to the music department. So one thing you should be careful of is you don't want to put more than can harm that can harm your application. Like if you really like music, but maybe you're not exactly good at an instrument or anything, I wouldn't try to cobble together a music supplement a month before just to have something to show. There's also STEM. I did a STEM supplement for a lot of the schools, which I wish I'd known of before I actually started applying, because I didn't really know STEM supplements existed until I started searching them up a little more in depth, like 2 months ago.
Explain that for somebody now who's watching this in August, that they can be prepared for that.
So a STEM supplement is just, if you did research over your years in high school, at a camp, or in someone's lab over summer, if you did research, they'll give you an opportunity to submit your abstract or in some cases your entire research paper. Sometimes like Columbia, they were very specific. They asked for your research sponsor, the place where you conducted the research. They asked for the abstract and any recognitions that you got for completing that research. Also like time spent in the lab, what was your role, things like that. Most schools aren't really that in depth, but especially if you have a research sponsor writing you a letter of rec, it doesn't hurt to send in like at least a description of what research you completed in that lab, even if it wasn't like your own project or anything.
Okay, it's great. Anything you want to talk about with that, Daniel? Did you send anything in?
No.
Okay.
Wait, one more thing. I'm sorry.
This is for you know, the bell's not going to ring.
Yeah. Okay. So pay attention to your deadlines. I say this in utmost sincerity because for my Yale application, I didn't realize that I was only able to submit my STEM supplement after I submitted my entire Common App. So the deadline to request a recommendation from my camp had passed by the time I started submitting my STEM recommendation for Yale, and it was pretty in-depth. So I had to call up my research sponsor from FSU and ask him to send in my recommendation for me instead of the camp itself, because I couldn't have it submitted by that time. So pay attention to your deadlines for recommendations, especially if you went to a camp, and for submitting the supplement itself.
Okay. Anything else? Any last thought? So here we go. Regrets and what you feel was like the thing that you did that made you the candidate that those schools wanted. First, I want regrets. If I could do this over again, what would I do different? By the way, I just thought of this 5 minutes ago. And then I would like you to feel good about something that what your biggest accomplishment was. Both of you are, there's three of us holding our chins up. Go ahead.
I think my biggest regret is applying early action to Princeton, because it was my dream school at the time when I applied. But after I went through the entire process with all the 15, 16 other schools that I went through, and I reread my application to Princeton, it was not great because it was one of the first schools that I had applied to. That's kind of why I advised heavily against applying early action, just because, again, the experience, you don't exactly know what you're doing when you write that first application. And I think mine would have turned out a lot better if I hadn't done it first. I ended up after I got deferred from early action, I got rejected during the regular pool. So there's that.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. It's the first game of the year. In fact, one of the suggestions, if I was sitting in the classroom now, I would say, get your state school application submitted and done weeks before you send in that EA action. So at least you sent 2 or 3 applications in before that EA application goes in. That the feeling of getting submitted, fine tuning it. You know, I agree with you 100%. And you may have done that, but you put so much pressure on the one that, you know, you put so much pressure on the EA. Okay. Any regrets there, Mr. Fein?
I think after I got into Harvard, I felt like there was nowhere else I would have gone that wasn't Harvard or Stanford, which is the other place I left my application open. But I slightly regret not applying to some other good schools like Yale or Princeton, just because I felt like during that time there wasn't a lot of I wasn't like as involved in the process, and I didn't think about like what I actually wanted to do as much as I would have been forced to if I had kept my other applications open. And also just I don't think this applies as much to next year, but this year the wait list happened to be like more generous than it usually is. So I wouldn't like count out schools that you're waitlisted for.
Okay. All right, so last one, I'm gonna change the last question. Talk about one last thing, the growth that you guys made between September and March. Like when we started school and you started the process, and then March when we got sent home, and you know, you were going home to, you were really went home to decision time for you, and then for, you know, for Daniel, you already sort of knew, but how much growth was there as a human being and knowledge base?
I think that I learned more in those months than I did in any other like months of high school or school in general, just because you're you're having to like reflect on yourself in your applications. And also I feel like the classes that are reserved for seniors, like macro, at least at our school, macro and gov, kind of put you into the real world instead of just learning like antiquated material. So I felt like I learned both like who I was and where I fit into like the context of everything else.
I think that from writing a lot of my essays, especially about my so-called passions and interests and all that, I actually developed a deeper interest in a lot of the things that I'd written about, because there were some, like, especially my research over the summer that I was actually doing the research, it wasn't super interesting a lot of the time. And that's what research is. It's a lot of waiting for your results. But as I was writing through my application, I realized a lot, like Daniel said, just how much I'd actually learned from the entire experience. And it's in the little things, I guess. That you find that you've learned a lot from the small experiences that might just pop into your mind when you're trying to write an essay. And then you write an essay about that and you've actually learned a lot more than you thought you did. So,
You know, as you're saying that, all I keep thinking is how important these things you're talking about are this year for these kids, who so many are going to go test optional. And they're going to have to bring this stuff out into their application to be strong, to be a stronger applicant, because they're going to have just maybe one test score, no test scores. We don't know, you know. So it's going to be very interesting for those kids where testing is not going to be the big factor. It's going to be the growth that they make. And they've had to grow over these past 6 months the last 5 months we just spent, you know, at home and or not doing anything. So it'd be very interesting, because we're not even talking SAT, ACT, which is like crazy. It's like that we're not talking about taking the next test because we don't know when the next test is going to be. So any advice for these kids who, something that you have no idea what that's going to be like for them. You only know your uncertainty. But any words of wisdom?
One thing I tried to tell myself a lot was it's going to be fine in the end. And a lot of other people, knowing my ability to stress out about every single little thing, told me the same thing. And I don't like, people say that and you feel like they're wrong, and then it comes to pass and you're like, they were kind of right. So it's not going to feel like you're fine at all unless you're like superhuman throughout those months of college applications. It's very stressful. You panic a lot and it's kind of terrifying. But when you're finished and you have your decisions and you're choosing where to go, you've already made it through 3 years of high school. You can make it through one more.
And they made it through a pandemic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would say just to just write, just start writing and just write.
You remember, it's funny, I don't know if you remember sophomore year I came into your class and I said, if something eventful happens in your life, write about it today. You know, I said, don't wait to write it because then it's just a story. And with the kids that I had in my office aide class or, you know, executive internship, I made them write the entire time. That's all I had them. That was their assignment to pass my class, was just to write. But it is so true. I mean, even right now, if somebody were watching, if I'm talking to somebody, right, as we go through the first few months of school and they're home watching this, okay, write about what they're feeling and the growth that they're making and they're being afraid. I would have loved to read your journal, Lindsay, if you had written a journal during those months. You know, and I laughed because as we go through this, all of this came down, and I made a joke with this in Secret Sauce, but it's so true. When this was all over, you took up fishing, the most boring sport in the not sport fishing off a canal, and something No, but it was where you needed to go, and it was a growth experience. It was relaxation. So, these kids need to know you're going to go fishing. You're going to be home relaxing and enjoying what's going to occur, even in these uncertain times, as long as they wear a mask.
Yes, please wear your masks.
Yes, please.
Please.
For my age group, please wear your mask.
And so you can get back to school in time.
Right. Hopefully we will. We can keep talking. I'm gonna edit whatever I want to edit out. It's very easy to edit on this. So yeah, are you happy with it? Are you happy?
Yes, I am. This turned out better than I thought it was gonna.
I wasn't sure. I knew we kept it small. It would be good.